My name is Lila, and I'm 32. I'm standing at my sister Sadie's wedding surrounded by fairy lights and laughter, in a navy dress I chose to fade into the background. The barn smells of roses and champagne, a warm glow softening the wooden beams above. I helped plan this day, pouring my heart into every detail: the peonies, the playlist, the cake, to make it perfect for her. I wanted her to feel love, to shine. But when Dad rises for his toast, his eyes skip over me, lingering on Sadie, his smile reserved for her. My chest tightens, a familiar ache surfacing. I clutch my purse, feeling the weight of the receipts inside, proof of my unseen efforts. My smile falters, and I wonder if I'll always be the shadow in this family. Have you ever felt invisible among those you love most? Tell me where you're watching from, and if this resonates, please like and subscribe. The barn's wooden beams glowed under soft string lights as the reception hummed around me. I sat at a corner table, the chatter of Sadie's friends blending with the clink of wine glasses and the faint strum of a guitar. My fingers traced the edge of my mom's locket, its cool metal grounding me against the rising tide of unease. I'd spent months quietly covering costs for this wedding: $5,000 for the peony centerpieces, $3,000 for the caterer's overtime, even the extra fee for the string quartet playing now. I didn't want praise, just a nod. Maybe a fleeting smile from Dad to say he saw me. But his toast lingered in my mind, that word mistakes cutting deeper than I'd let on, like a blade slipped between ribs. I glanced at Sadie, radiant in her white gown, her laughter bright as she leaned into Ethan, her new husband. She hadn't mentioned my help once, not in her texts or during our late-night planning calls. I told myself it was fine, she was swept up in the joy of her day. But then Harper, my cousin, leaned over, her brown curls brushing the tablecloth. Her voice was low, barely audible over the music. "Sadie knew you paid for the flowers, Lila. She told me last week she'd thank you in her speech." My chest tightened, a sharp pang of betrayal. No thank you came, not even a glance. I forced a sip of wine, its bitterness sharp on my tongue, mirroring the sting in my heart. Growing up, Sadie was the golden child her school plays, earning standing ovations from Dad, while my straight-A report cards got a distracted pat on the head. I'd spent my childhood trailing her light, hoping some of it would spill onto me. I thought this wedding might be different, that my quiet sacrifices, hours on the phone with vendors, my savings drained, would finally make him see me as more than an afterthought. But his glance during the toast, that half-smirk, said I was still the same invisible girl. Harper nudged me, her hazel eyes searching mine. "You okay?" That toast was weird. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I wanted to believe it was a joke, a clumsy moment. But the way Dad's eyes slid past me felt like a script I'd read too many times. I remembered being 12, standing in our old living room, clutching my science fair trophy, its blue ribbon crisp and new. I'd waited for Dad to notice, to say something, anything. He'd walked right by, ruffling Sadie's hair as she showed him her new sketchbook. The memory burned raw and fresh. A guest at our table, one of Dad's old co-workers, chuckled, his face flushed from too much wine. "Your dad's got away with words, huh? Calling you a mistake like that." He thought it was funny, a light jab. I faked a laugh, my face hot, my fingers tightening around the locket. It was Mom's, a simple silver oval she'd given me before she died when I was 15. She'd always seen me, her quiet encouragements, a lifeline through Dad's indifference. Now, without her, I was navigating his coldness alone, still hoping for a warmth he'd never offer. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from Tessa, my best friend, seated across the room in a green dress that caught the light. "You don't have to stay, Lila. You've done enough." Her words were a lifeline, but I typed back, "I'm fine," my hands trembling. I wasn't fine. Harper reached for my arm, her touch gentle but firm. "You did so much for this, Lila. It's not right." Her words stung because they were true. I'd poured half my savings into this wedding, thinking it would stitch our fractured family together. Instead, I was still the outsider, the one Dad could dismiss with a laugh. My wine glass sat empty, the tablecloth's lace pattern blurring as I stared at it, willing myself to hold it together. The night stretched ahead. and I felt the ground shifting beneath me, unsteady and cruel. The barn's warmth felt stifling now, the hum of conversation pressing against my ears like a physical weight. I stood to escape the table, weaving through clusters of guests, their smiles blurring into a haze of white teeth and glittering jewelry. My navy dress caught on a chair, the fabric tugging as I freed it, mirroring the unraveling inside me. I headed for the open bar, its polished wood counter, a small refuge. I needed a moment to breathe, to steady the ache threatening to spill over. The bartender, a young man with kind eyes, slid a glass of water my way without a word. I sipped it, staring at the counter's grain, its swirls a distraction from the storm in my chest. Harper followed her heels, clicking softly on the floor. "Lila, you don't have to pretend it's okay," she said, her voice low, almost swallowed by the band's cover of a pop song. I shrugged, avoiding her gaze, my fingers tracing the glass's rim. "It's Sadie's day. I don't want to make a scene." But inside, I was screaming. I'd spent thousands on this wedding, 3 hours driving to pick up Sadie's custom veil late nights, emailing the florist to ensure every petal was perfect. I'd done it all for her, for them, thinking it would mean something. And for what? To be the punchline of Dad's toast. I glanced at the dance floor where Sadie twirled with Ethan, her laughter bright and effortless, her gown catching the light like a beacon. I remembered her at 16 sneaking out to parties while I lied to Dad, saying she was studying at a friend's. She'd hugged me, then called me her hero, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. Now she hadn't even looked my way all night, her attention reserved for the crowd adoring her. I wondered when we'd stopped being sisters, when I'd become just a shadow in her story. A memory hit me sharp and unbidden, our old family cabin summers before Mom died. I was 14, teaching Sadie to braid daisies into crowns, our fingers sticky with sap. Dad would grill burgers, his laugh warm his arm around Mom as they swayed to old radio tunes. Back then I thought he loved us equally, that his gruff affection was enough for us both. But after Mom's death, he changed, his warmth reserved for Sadie. He'd snap at me for leaving dishes out, but let Sadie off for crashing his car. I'd told myself it was his grief that he'd come back to me. Standing here, I saw the truth. I'd been chasing a ghost, a version of him that never existed. A guest bumped into me, spilling wine on my sleeve, the red stain blooming like a wound. "Oh, sorry, hun," she said, giggling, her breath heavy with alcohol. "You're Sadie's sister, right?" Your dad's speech was a riot. My throat tightened and I mumbled something, turning away. I spotted Dad across the room, holding court with his old buddies, his face lit with pride as he gestured broadly. Karen stood beside him, her hand on his arm, nodding as he spoke, her smile sharp. I wondered if she'd fed him that line about me, if they'd planned this jab to keep me in my place. My phone buzzed again, Tessa relentless. "You're worth more than this, Lila. Walk away." I wanted to, but my feet stayed glued to the floor, rooted by years of hoping I could prove I belonged. I'd thought paying for the wedding would show Dad I was enough, that I was more than the quiet daughter he overlooked. But now, with every laugh and sidelong glance, I felt smaller, like I was shrinking into the shadows of their story. Harper touched my shoulder, her eyes soft but urgent. "You don't deserve this, Lila. Say something." Her words sparked a flicker of defiance, but it fizzled fast. What could I say that wouldn't ruin Sadie's day? I looked at the locket, Mom's initials etched into its surface, her memory, a faint anchor. She'd tell me to stand tall, but I felt like I was crumbling. The band switched to a louder song, the crowd cheering, oblivious to the storm inside me. I gripped the bar counter, my heart racing, knowing this night was only going to get harder. The band's upbeat tempo clashed with the storm in my chest as I stood by the bar, water glass trembling in my hand. I wanted to disappear, to slip out into the night and leave this pain behind, but Sadie's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She was striding toward me, her white dress trailing across the wooden floor, her smile tight and forced. "Lila, can we talk?" she said, pulling me toward a quiet corner near the dessert table, where cupcakes sat untouched, their icing gleaming under the lights. Her tone was sharp, not warm, her eyes scanning the room as if checking for witnesses. "You need to behave tonight. Don't make this about you." Her words hit like a slap, stealing my breath. I blinked, stunned, my voice barely a whisper. Behave, Sadie. I've done nothing but help you. My throat tightened, but she didn't flinch, her gaze hard. This is my day, she said. Eyes narrowing, her voice low but cutting. Don't pull your usual drama. Drama? I'd spent months making sure her wedding was perfect, negotiating with the venue to secure this barn covering the photographer's last-minute fee, when Sadie's budget fell short. I'd done it all quietly, thinking it would mean something to her, to us. I opened my mouth to argue, but she turned away, already waving at a guest, her dismissal as sharp as a door slammed shut. I leaned against the wall, my breath shallow, the room spinning with laughter and the clink of forks against plates. It felt like I was underwater, the sounds muffled, the lights too bright. How had it come to this? I remembered Sadie at 18 crying in my car when her prom date ditched her. I'd driven her to the dance, waited in the parking lot until midnight, my homework untouched. She'd called me her rock, her voice thick with gratitude. Now I was her problem, a threat to her perfect day. The betrayal sank deeper, twisting like a knife in my gut. Across the room, one of Dad's golf buddies approached, his face red from wine, his tie loosened. Hey, Lila, your dad's toast was a hoot, he said, chuckling, oblivious to the wound he was prodding. You must keep him on his toes. I forced a nod, my throat so tight I could barely swallow. He didn't know how those words burned, how they echoed years of being pushed aside, of being the daughter who didn't matter. I glanced at Dad, still laughing with Karen near the cake, its tears gleaming white. She caught my eye, her smile cold, and whispered something to him. He didn't look my way, his laughter carrying over the music. My mind flashed to a Christmas when I was 17, right after Mom died. I'd saved up for months to buy Dad a leather wallet, its stitching perfect, hoping it would make him smile, make him see me. He'd thanked me distractedly, his eyes on Sadie, as she showed off her new painting, a messy watercolor he called a masterpiece. Karen had smirked, saying I was too sensitive when I slipped out of the room, my gift forgotten. Now here she was, fueling Dad's narrative again, ensuring I stayed the outsider. I wondered if they'd planned this night to humiliate me, to keep me small in their story. Tessa's text lit up my phone. Lila, you don't owe them anything. Leave. I wanted to, my fingers itching to grab my purse and run, but my legs wouldn't move. I'd spent years trying to stitch this family together, thinking my efforts, my money, my time would earn me a place at their table. Instead, Sadie's words and Dad's friends' laughter made me feel like a ghost, unseen, unneeded. The dessert table stood nearby, its cupcakes, ones I'd paid for, mocking me with their pastel perfection. I gripped my locket. Mom's memory, the only thing keeping me from breaking. But even that felt fragile now, like it might slip through my fingers. The air in the barn felt thicker now, pressing against my skin as I stood frozen by the dessert table, Sadie's dismissal echoing in my head. Her words sliced through years of loyalty, each one a fresh cut. I wanted to scream, to tell her how I'd stayed up nights balancing her wedding budget, how I'd driven across state lines to fix vendor mistakes, but my voice stayed locked in my throat, trapped by years of silence. The band's music swelled, a love ballad that felt like a cruel joke, its lyrics about forever mocking my unraveling family ties. I scanned the room, desperate for an anchor. But every face smiling, laughing, clinking glasses belonged to their world, not mine. I caught sight of Karen weaving through the crowd, her red dress stark against the soft lights, her heels clicking with purpose. She stopped near a group of Sadie's friends, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear over the music. Lila's always been the difficult one, she said, her tone dripping with false pity. She never quite fit, you know. A few heads nodded, their eyes flicking toward me. Some curious, some smug. My face burned and I turned away, pretending to adjust my dress, my fingers fumbling with the fabric. Had she always talked about me like this, painting me as the problem child to anyone who'd listen? A memory crashed over me. My 21st birthday, when I'd hoped Dad would show up to the dinner I'd planned. I'd spent all day cooking, setting the table with Mom's old china, its delicate floral pattern a reminder of her. He'd canceled last minute, saying Sadie needed him for some school event, a debate competition she didn't even win. Karen had called later, her voice syrupy, saying I shouldn't take it personally, but her tone was smug, like she'd won something. Now, hearing her words at the wedding, I realized she'd been shaping Dad's view of me for years, whispering that I was too quiet, too stubborn, too much. She'd made sure I stayed on the outside, a footnote in their family. I moved toward the edge of the room, my heels sinking into the soft grass outside the barn's open doors. The night air was cool, brushing my skin, but it didn't ease the knot in my chest. I overheard my Uncle Ray, loud and half-drunk at a nearby table, his voice booming over the crowd. "Sadie's the star of this family," he said, raising his glass, sloshing whiskey. "Always has been. Perfect daughter, perfect wedding, no mention of me, not even a glance in my direction." The guests cheered their applause, a wall I couldn't breach. I felt like I was disappearing piece by piece, my presence erased from their celebration. My phone buzzed again, Tessa's name flashing. "Lila, you're enough. Get out of there." Her words were a plea, but leaving felt like admitting defeat, like letting them win the narrative they'd written for me. I'd poured so much into this wedding, my savings, my sleepless nights, my hope thinking it would earn me a place in their world. Instead, I was the backdrop to their joy, the one they could mock or ignore without a second thought. I looked back at Sadie, now posing for photos, her smile flawless, her posture perfect. She was wearing Mom's pearl earrings, the ones Dad gave her last year, without ever asking if I wanted them, without thinking I might care. My fingers tightened around the locket, its edges digging into my palm, a sharp reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd never gain. I wanted to march over to demand why they treated me like this, why my love was never enough. But my legs wouldn't move, pinned by the weight of their rejection, each laugh and whisper adding another stone to the pile, crushing me. Karen's voice rang out again, closer now, talking to a guest. "Lila's just jealous of Sadie's happiness," she said, her words a poison dart. The lie stung worse than anything yet, and I felt my heart fracture, a deep crack spreading, knowing the worst was still to come. The barn's lights seemed to dim as the band paused, and Dad's voice boomed through the mic, pulling every eye to him. I stood frozen near the grass, my heart hammering so loud, I barely heard the crowd's chatter fade into a hush. He was starting another speech. His glass raised, his smile wide but sharp, like a blade hidden in velvet. "Family's everything," he said, nodding at Sadie. Then Ethan, his voice warm with pride. "But sometimes you make mistakes." His eyes locked on me, cold and deliberate, cutting through the crowd. Lila was my biggest one. The room erupted in laughter, a wave of sound that crashed over me, each chuckle a splinter in my skin. My breath caught my face, burning as if I'd been slapped, the heat spreading to my chest. Sadie smirked, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's arm, her eyes gleaming with something like triumph. Karen's approving nod cut deeper than Dad's words, her lips curving in a way that said she'd expected this. I felt like I was shrinking, every laugh stripping away years of trying to belong, leaving me raw and exposed. I wanted to run, to flee into the night, but my feet were rooted to the grass, my body betraying me. My mind screamed, how could he say that I'd paid for this wedding, every cent of the venue deposit, the band's fee, the open bar now fueling their laughter? I'd stayed up nights, balancing their budget, calling vendors at dawn to fix last-minute issues, thinking it would make Dad see me as more than a disappointment. Instead, he'd turned me into a joke for 200 strangers, their amusement a weight I couldn't bear. My chest ached, a raw, hollow pain, like something vital had been ripped out and left bleeding. A memory slammed into me. I was 16, sitting alone at Mom's funeral, the church pew cold beneath me. Dad was too busy consoling Sadie to notice my tears, my hands shaking as I clutched Mom's scarf. I'd begged him later to talk, to share the grief that was choking me, but he'd brushed me off, saying I was strong enough to handle it. Strong enough. That's what I'd been my whole life, swallowing hurt to keep the peace, believing one day he'd see me. Now standing here, I realized he'd never seen me, not really, and maybe he never would. Harper appeared at my side, her face pale, her hand grabbing my arm. "Lila, you don't have to take this," she whispered, her voice trembling with anger. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak, my throat closed tight. The laughter died down, but the weight of their eyes stayed, some curious, some pitying, pinning me in place. Dad kept talking, praising Sadie's grace, Ethan's promise, as if I wasn't there, as if I'd never been part of his story. Karen leaned into him, whispering, her smile smug, and I wondered how long they'd planned this moment, how many times they'd agreed I was the flaw in their perfect family picture. My purse felt heavy against my hip, the crumpled wedding planner's receipt inside it burning a hole. I'd kept it proof of my love, my sacrifice, a tangible record of everything I'd given. Now it felt like evidence of my stupidity, a reminder I'd poured myself into a family that didn't want me. The band started up again, a slow song, its notes soft and mocking, and couples drifted to the dance floor, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I stood there, heart splintering, knowing I couldn't stay silent much longer, but terrified of what speaking would cost. Dad's voice droned on, each word a hammer against my crumbling resolve. The barn's warm glow felt like a spotlight pinning me in place as guests glanced my way, some whispering, others smirking behind their glasses. My vision blurred, tears I refused to let fall stinging my eyes, my breath shallow and uneven. Sadie's smirk widened her fingers, brushing Ethan's sleeve, her confidence unshaken. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding me entirely. Karen raised her glass as if toasting Dad's cruelty, her smile a silent endorsement that cut deeper than the laughter. My whole life flashed before me, every late-night call I took when Sadie needed a ride, every check I wrote to cover her mistakes, every moment I swallowed my pain to avoid being called difficult. I'd been the fixer, the one who kept the family afloat, thinking it would earn me a place. All for this, a public dismissal, a room full of strangers laughing at my expense. I remembered my college graduation, standing alone in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for Dad's face. He'd promised to come, but Sadie's cheerleading finals were that day, and he chose her without a second thought. I'd called him later, voice shaking, asking why he hadn't shown. He'd said I was too independent, didn't need him there. Now those words rang hollow, a lie to mask his neglect. I wasn't independent. I was invisible, and he'd made sure I stayed that way. Lucas, my old friend from high school, stood nearby, his face tight with shock, his hands shoved in his pockets. He stepped toward me, mouthing, "I'm sorry," his eyes full of regret. But it was too late. His silence all these years had let Dad's narrative take root. The room felt like it was closing in the air, thick with judgment, the music a distant hum. I saw Aunt Clara, Mom's sister, watching from a corner, her eyes sad but silent, her hands clasped tightly. She'd warned me years ago at a family picnic that Dad would never change, that his heart had room for only one daughter. I hadn't listened, clinging to hope, but now her words echoed heavy and true. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms, the pain sharp but grounding. The receipt in my purse felt like a live wire, proof of my worth. They'd never acknowledge a truth they'd buried under their laughter. I wanted to scream, to tear down their perfect facade, to make them see me for once. But my voice was gone, stolen by years of being told I was less, that I was the mistake in their story. The band played on, couples swaying as if nothing had happened, their joy a stark contrast to my unraveling. I stood there, raw and exposed, my heart shattering under the weight of Dad's words, with nowhere left to hide and no strength left to run. The silence in the barn was deafening, my words still echoing as every eye locked on me. I stood at the mic, my heart pounding but steady, the weight of years lifting with each breath I took. I looked at Dad, his face a mask of shock, his usual charm frozen. Sadie's eyes darted away, her fingers twitching nervously. "I'm done trying to prove I'm enough," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "I paid for this wedding to show I loved you, but I don't need your approval anymore." The crowd stirred, murmurs rising like a tide, a mix of shock and unease rippling through the room. I saw Aunt Clara nod slightly, her eyes wet as if she'd been waiting for me to find this strength, her hands clasped in quiet pride. I thought of Mom, her gentle voice telling me to speak my truth, to stand tall even when it hurt. I'd spent years chasing Dad's love, molding myself to fit his idea of a daughter, dimming my light to make room for Sadie's. But now standing here, I realized I'd been enough all along. The truth wasn't theirs to define, and I was done letting them try. I stepped back from the mic, my hands steady now, my breath even. I reached into my purse, pulled out the crumpled receipt, its edges worn from being carried too long, and set it on the gift table next to a framed photo of Sadie and Ethan, their smiles frozen in time. It was my final offering, not to them, but to myself, a proof I wasn't invisible, a record of my love they couldn't erase. Harper whispered Lila. "You're incredible," her voice thick with emotion, but I barely heard her, my focus on the door, the cool night air calling me like a promise. I walked through the crowd, their faces a blur, some staring, others whispering, their glasses paused mid-air. Sadie called out, "Lila, wait," her voice sharp with panic, her heels clicking as she started toward me. But I didn't turn, didn't slow. Tessa stood by the exit, her smile fierce, her nod, saying everything, "You did it." I pushed open the barn doors, the music fading to a dull hum, the gravel crunching under my heels. I left the locket on the table, its weight no longer mine to carry, a final release of the girl who'd begged for their love. I wasn't running. I was choosing myself, and each step into the night felt like freedom, like breathing for the first time. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, the barn's warmth fading behind me like a dream I was waking from. I stood in the gravel lot, my breath visible in the chilly dark, my heart still racing from the mic, each beat a reminder of what I'd done. My phone buzzed in my purse, insistent, but I ignored it, needing the silence more than their words. The stars above were sharp like pinpricks in a velvet sky, and I felt raw but free, as if I'd shed a skin I'd worn too long, one woven from their expectations. I'd spoken my truth, laid it bare for all to see, and there was no going back now. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages, a cascade of notifications I wasn't ready to face. Sadie's name flashed first, her voicemail sharp and accusing, her voice tight with indignation. "Lila, you humiliated me on my wedding day," she said, each word clipped. "How could you make it about you?" I deleted it without replying, my fingers steady, my heart unmoved. She didn't mention the money I'd spent, the nights I'd stayed up planning her perfect day, the hours I'd spent ensuring every detail was flawless. Her silence on that spoke louder than her anger, a confirmation of what I'd always feared: my love was invisible to her. Harper texted next, her words softer, laced with awe. "People were talking after you left, Lila. Some of Dad's friends cornered him, asking if it was true about the money. He didn't answer, just stood there, red-faced." I pictured Dad's face, caught off guard, his usual charm failing him for once, his confidence cracking under the weight of my truth. It felt like a small victory, a shift in the narrative I'd never expected, but it didn't erase the ache. I'd wanted him to see me, to value me, not just be exposed for his cruelty. I sat on my couch, the morning light filtering through my apartment's blinds, casting thin stripes across my hands like bars I was finally stepping through. A memory surfaced, gentle but piercing: Mom, teaching me to bake bread when I was 10, her hands guiding mine to knead the dough, her laugh soft as she dusted flour from my cheek. She'd said, "You don't need to be loud to be strong, Lila." I'd clung to that, thinking quiet sacrifices would win Dad over, that my efforts would make him love me the way he loved Sadie. Now I saw how wrong I'd been. My strength wasn't in staying silent and carrying their burdens. It was in walking away and claiming my own story. But the cost was heavy. Sadie's anger, Dad's avoidance, a family I might lose for good, a loneliness that lingered like a bruise. Tessa called, her voice bright, cutting through the fog. "Lila, you were fierce last night. People are texting me saying they had no idea you did so much. A few even apologized for laughing." I smiled faintly, but the weight lingered heavy as the untouched coffee cooling on my table. Guests had reached out, some with apologies, others with questions. Why hadn't I said anything sooner? Their words were kind, a small balm, but they couldn't fill the hole Dad's rejection had carved out. I stared at the steam curling from my mug, its shape fleeting like the family I'd tried to hold together. What now? I thought, the question hanging in the quiet of my apartment, unanswered but pressing. I set my coffee down, the mug cold now, and stared at the blind's shadows shifting across my floor, their patterns dancing in the morning light. My phone buzzed again, this time an email from Dad, its lack of a subject line as cold as his words. "We need to talk, Lila. Call me when you're ready." No apology, no mention of the wedding, just his usual demand for control, as if I owed him my response. I closed the email, my chest tight but resolute. He'd never see what he'd done, never admit the years he'd pushed me away, and I was done waiting for him to try. I stood and paced my small apartment, the hardwood creaking under my bare feet, each step a small rebellion against the weight of his words. Lucas texted his message, hesitant but sincere. "I didn't know how much you did for them, Lila." I should have spoken up at the wedding. His words were kind, but they stung, a reminder of how many had believed Dad's story about me, the difficult daughter, the one who didn't fit. I'd spent years being the dependable one, fixing their messes, paying their bills, thinking it would earn me a place at their table. Now I saw it only made me easier to overlook a prop in their perfect family scene. I glanced at a photo on my shelf, me and Mom at a county fair when I was 8, her arm around me, both of us laughing, cotton candy staining our fingers. She'd died before I could learn how to stand up to Dad's indifference, before I could ask her how to love a family that didn't love me back. I wondered what she'd think of me now, walking out of that barn, leaving my truth on that gift table, like a final goodbye. My phone lit up again. "Sadie," this time a text. "You made everyone uncomfortable, Lila. Fix this, fix it." I'd spent my life fixing things for her, from her broken plans to her wedding day, and she still saw me as the problem, the one who needed to make it right. I walked to my window, the city humming below, its rhythm steady and indifferent to my unraveling. Harper called, her voice soft but urgent. "Lila, some guests left early after you spoke. Karen's telling people you lied about the money, saying you're exaggerating to get attention." I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in my quiet apartment. Of course she was. Karen had always rewritten my story, whispering to Dad that I was the flaw, the one who didn't belong in their perfect family portrait. I didn't respond, just hung up, my hands shaking, but my resolve firm. The weight of their rejection settled deeper, a quiet ache that wasn't loud, but relentless, like a tide eroding stone. I thought of the receipt I'd left on the gift table, a small piece of paper that held my truth, a record of my love they couldn't deny. They could spin their stories, call me jealous or difficult, but they couldn't erase what I'd done. I sank onto my couch, the morning light fading as clouds rolled in, casting my apartment in a soft gray. I'd stood up for myself, spoken my truth in a room full of their laughter, but the cost was clear. I was alone now, and the silence felt heavier than their words ever had. I walked through the park near my apartment, the October leaves crunching under my boots, their red and gold a quiet contrast to the storm I'd left behind at the wedding. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, and I let it fill my lungs, grounding me in a way the barn's warmth never could. I'd been avoiding my phone since that night, the silence a shield against Sadie's texts, Dad's emails, and the weight of their expectations. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to fix things, to shrink myself to fit their story, to beg for a place I'd never been given. I found a bench by a small pond, its surface rippling under a soft breeze, the water catching the afternoon light in fleeting glints. I sat, pulling my scarf tighter, watching a pair of ducks glide across, their movements calm and unhurried. I thought of Nora, my cousin, who'd texted me yesterday asking to meet here. She'd been at the wedding, a quiet presence in the crowd, her dark eyes watching from the edges. Her message was simple, raw. "I get it, Lila. I've been the outcast too." I'd agreed to see her, curious but cautious, wondering if she'd seen the same rejection I had. When Nora arrived, her dark hair tucked under a beanie, she sat beside me, her breath fogging in the cool air. "I left my family's Christmas last year," she said, staring at the pond, her voice steady but heavy. "They kept comparing me to my sisters, saying my art was a hobby, not a life. Like I was never enough." Her words hit close, mirroring the ache I'd carried for years. We talked our stories, spilling out, her parents dismissing her paintings, my years of chasing Dad's approval, only to be called his mistake. It felt like finding a mirror, someone who understood the weight of being unseen, of loving a family that didn't love you back. I shared how I donated Mom's earrings to a charity auction after Sadie sent them back in a plain envelope. No note, no explanation. Letting them go wasn't easy. Those pearls were Mom's, a piece of her I'd wanted to hold on to, but it felt right, like releasing a pain I'd carried too long. Nora nodded her hand, brushing mine, a small gesture of solidarity. "You're not alone in this, Lila," she said, her voice soft but firm. I smiled, small but real, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected, a connection that didn't demand I prove myself. For once I wasn't trying to earn a place, just sitting, listening, existing in a moment that was mine. The ducks drifted farther out, their ripples fading into the pond's stillness. I thought of a summer when I was 9. Mom taking me to this same park to feed the birds, her hands gentle, as she showed me how to scatter crumbs. She'd said, "You don't have to be anyone's favorite to matter, Lila." I'd forgotten that until now, buried it under years of trying to be enough for Dad. The park was quiet, the world slowing down, and I felt my shoulders loosen, like I was finally letting go of a weight I'd carried too long, a burden I'd mistaken for love. The park's quiet wrapped around me as Nora and I sat the pond, reflecting a fading sunset, its colors bleeding into the water. I pulled a small notebook from my bag, one I'd started using to jot down thoughts since the wedding, a habit that felt like reclaiming my voice. My pen moved slowly, tracing words I hadn't dared say aloud before, "I am enough." Writing it felt like a vow, not to anyone else but to myself, a promise to stop measuring my worth by their standards. Nora glanced over, her smile soft, her eyes warm. "You're starting to see it, aren't you?" she said, her voice a quiet encouragement. I nodded, my throat tight, the words sinking deeper than I expected. I thought of the tree I'd planted here last week, a small maple in Mom's memory, its delicate branches barely visible against the park's older trees. It wasn't grand, just a quiet act of building something new, something that didn't depend on Dad or Sadie. I'd spent so long tying my worth to their approval, bending myself to fit their expectations, thinking love was something I had to earn. Now I saw they didn't hold the measure of me, that my life could grow on its own terms, rooted in my own truth. Miles, another cousin, had texted earlier, his message unexpected but sincere. "I was wrong to stay quiet at the wedding, Lila. Can we talk soon?" I'd replied, suggesting coffee next week, not because I needed his approval, but because I was learning to choose who I let in, to build connections that didn't demand I shrink. His outreach felt like a crack in the wall I'd always faced, a small shift, but I didn't need it to feel whole. I was finding my own way, step by step, in the quiet moments that belonged to me. I stood brushing leaves from my coat and walked to the pond's edge. The water still now, the ducks gone. I remembered Mom's laugh, how she'd hum while gardening, her hands in the soil, as she taught me to find joy in small things, blooming flowers, a warm breeze. I'd lost that for years, chasing a family that didn't see me, trying to be the daughter they wanted. Now I felt it returning, like a seed breaking through soil, fragile but alive. I slipped the notebook back in my bag, its weight light, but grounding, a reminder of the life I was building. Karen had tried texting the group chat last night, some vague jab about family loyalty, her words sharp but predictable. I'd muted it, not out of anger but peace, a choice to protect my own heart. I didn't need to fight their story anymore, didn't need to prove them wrong. The sky darkened, stars peeking through the twilight, and I breathed deeply, feeling the world expand around me. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was here, standing on my own terms, ready to keep going, my steps steadier than they'd ever been. I sat at my favorite coffee shop, the hum of chatter blending with the scent of roasted beans, a familiar comfort in the early spring light. My journal lay open on the table, its pages filled with thoughts I'd been untangling for months, each word a step toward clarity. The wedding was a distant memory now, its sharp edges softened by time, but its echoes had reshaped me in ways I hadn't expected. I'd stopped checking Dad's emails, stopped waiting for Sadie's apologies, stopped trying to fit into a family that didn't see me. For the first time, I was living for myself, not their shadows, and it felt like stepping into sunlight after years in the dark. I'd started small routines like this, one coffee journaling a quiet hour before my design work began, the soft scratch of my pen grounding me. Each word I wrote felt like carving out space for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I'd taken up sketching again, a passion I'd loved as a kid, but abandoned when Mom died, when grief and Dad's indifference had buried that part of me. My pencils scratched out simple things, trees bending in the wind, faces caught in mid-laugh fleeting moments, and it felt like rediscovering a language I'd forgotten a way to speak without needing their approval. Nora and I met weekly now, our talks a lifeline, a space where I didn't have to explain myself. Last Sunday over tea at her small apartment, she'd shared how she'd cut contact with her parents, choosing peace over their constant judgment of her art, her life. I'd told her about my new boundaries, no more family events where I'd be sidelined, no more chasing Dad's approval or Sadie's gratitude. She'd squeezed my hand, her eyes bright. "You're building something real, Lila," she said, and her words stayed with me, a reminder I wasn't alone, that I could choose who walked beside me. I glanced at the barista, a young woman with a warm smile who always remembered my order. Today she'd slipped an extra biscuit on my plate, a small kindness that warmed me more than the coffee. I thought of Mom, how she'd find joy in these moments, a stranger's smile, a warm drink, the way sunlight fell across a table. I'd spent years thinking strength meant enduring pain, carrying their burdens without complaint. But now I saw it in these quiet choices, showing up for myself, letting go of what didn't serve me, building a life that felt true. My phone buzzed, a message from Miles confirming our coffee date tomorrow. He'd been reaching out more since the wedding, his apologies turning into real conversations about his own regrets, his own struggles to find his place. I didn't need him to fix the past, but his effort meant something, a bridge I could choose to cross or not. The shop's chatter faded as I sipped my coffee, the world soft and steady around me, like a song I was finally learning the words to. I wasn't whole yet, but I was here, breathing easier, finding my way one small step at a time. The coffee shop's hum faded as I closed my journal, my pen resting on the table, its ink smudged from my fingers. I looked out the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk, each carrying their own unseen stories, their steps quick or slow, their faces open or guarded. Months ago, I'd stood in that barn, my heart raw, my voice trembling as I spoke my truth, thinking I'd lost everything. Now I saw it differently. Walking away wasn't just about leaving them. It was about finding me, about claiming a life that didn't depend on their approval or Sadie's gratitude. I'd learned that love starts within, not with their validation, and that realization was a quiet revolution. I started therapy last month, a quiet step I hadn't shared with anyone yet, not even Nora. Each session felt like peeling back layers, uncovering the girl I'd buried under their expectations, the one who'd loved fiercely, but doubted her own worth. I talked about Mom, how her warmth had shaped me, her quiet strength a guide I'd lost sight of. I'd let Dad's coldness redefine me, let his words make me feel small, but now I was unlearning that piece by piece. My therapist asked what I wanted my life to mean, and I realized I didn't need to be their hero or their villain. I just needed to be Lila, whole and enough. I'd posted about the wedding online, not to shame them, but to share my truth, to let it breathe. Messages poured in from strangers, people who'd felt invisible in their own families, their words raw and honest. "I've been the scapegoat too," one wrote. "Thank you for speaking up." Their stories were a mirror showing me my pain wasn't singular, that my voice mattered. I'd started replying, building connections with people who saw me for who I was, not who I'd tried to be for Dad or Sadie. It wasn't family in the way I'd known, but it felt truer, built on mutual understanding, on shared scars and shared healing. Dad showed up at a family barbecue last week, his smile hesitant, his voice soft as he asked to talk. I said no, not out of anger, but because I wasn't ready, because I didn't need his apology to move forward. Sadie posted a vague note online, something about misunderstandings, a half-hearted gesture I didn't need to respond to. I scrolled past, my heart steady. Their world wasn't mine anymore. I'd found my own of the quiet of this coffee shop, in the sketches that filled my evenings, in Nora's laughter, and Miles's growing friendship in the small moments that reminded me I was enough. I looked at the empty chair across from me, imagining Mom sitting there, her eyes proud, her smile warm. I'd learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who see you, who stay when it's hard, who lift you up without asking you to shrink. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough, and that was the freedom I'd been chasing all along. What moment made you realize your own worth? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, please like, subscribe, or share to spread this journey. Thank you for listening, and here's to finding your own light.